Okay, everybody, check this out. No notes, because I know this guy so well that we could probably talk for 3 hours. We're not going to do that. But we have John Eberhart back on Deer Talk now. John, thanks for joining us once again.
Hey, Dan, thanks for the opportunity. Always look forward to doing podcasts
You
with
know,
you.
we could talk so many things. I could probably get you riled up. I'm trying not to do that today.
It's easy to do.
We saved that for our personal phone calls, and I'm sure the listeners would like to hear it. But today we're talking because we're so close to bow season. I really want to pick your brain because it's really helped me personally over the years. As you know, I grew up hunting like you still hunt, that you continue to hunt to this day. And I know you don't shy away from this, so I'm going to ask you so you can repeat it to our listeners and viewers. How old are you again, John?
73.
73. Does that look like a 73-year-old man? This dude could kick my ass 5 ways to Friday and out hunt me a million times more. I just am so impressed, John, in the shape that you've kept yourself and the mental toughness that you take to bow hunting is something that, and I know your head's going to get way too big over this now, but just how do you keep that fire going after all these years of bow hunting?
Well, because I hunt exclusively on public and not free walk-on and free permission properties, hunting for mature bucks on those types of properties requires a lot of work. I mean, it's not like on most of the TV shows where you walk down a pristine two-track or a field edge and you sit in a box blind over a pick cornfield or a food plot and shoot big bucks. You know, it requires physical work and it requires skill, woodsmanship. And so, for 40 plus years, to stay in shape for the rigors of bow hunting and the mental capacities of bow hunting, I work out every evening I'm home.
Why did no? What keeps that drive going? You've killed more than 30 record class bucks in your career or
55.
your life.
55
35.
to be exact.
35 to be exact.
No, 55.
55. How does it? Do you ever get to the point you have never gotten to that point where it's like, you know what, screw it, I want to go sit in a box blind with a Mr. Heater and
And a crossbow?
shoot a crossbow over a bait pile.
No, never. I love bow hunting against competition. I love the competition. I think it's hard to put anybody's skill set into perspective if they don't hunt amongst competition. When you're hunting pristine properties like a lot of the TV guys do, where there's no competition, they don't shoot bucks till they're 4.5 years old. Probably 50% of the bow hunters in the country could kill the same bucks they're killing, if not do better than they are, because they physically have to know how to hunt to kill bucks in pressured areas. So, you know what? I have never lost my drive, and obviously I can't do what I could as little as 10 years ago because my shoulders are bum and everything is getting old and creaky. I'm only shooting 40-pound bow, but I've never lost that drive and will to go out. I just love it. I love nature.
Yeah.
I mean, Dan, you know that.
Yep.
You and I relate so much on a lot of the things you used to do in the past.
Yep.
Just sitting out in nature on a pristine morning, watching squirrels making tracks in the fresh snow in the late season, just buzzard flying in a tree and spreading their wings in the morning to get the morning dew off their wings so they can fly. I love nature.
It's funny you mentioned that. I don't mean to cut you off. The buzzards, because my brother Tony's going to be listening to this. He just texted me on Sunday, and he said he saw some buzzards, and they were doing that, and and I knew it, but it's like it's something that we take for granted. And I learned that years ago bow hunting, when you see that, but those are the types of things that you see from a tree that you've hung that you probably aren't going to see. Well, you're certainly not going to see it if you're not a hunter, but you're not going to see it if you are. Now, I am guilty. I hunt in enclosed blinds and I shoot crossbows. I do it all, obviously because of this job, but I'm not to the level where I used to be. When we hunted public land, and it was not only just trying to outsmart a deer, it was trying to outsmart everybody else.
Absolutely.
And that's where I've got a lot of my tips from you. But I didn't mean to cut that part off. What I want to talk about, though, is Okay, we're in August. Ian, is this airing in August? Okay, so we're in August. Most of our bow seasons start here in September. I know some people have to wait until October. What are the things that you're doing right now if you have to look at a new property or you're hunting a property that you've hunted before, but it's not a permanent stand or semi-permanent stand? It's not a ground blind. It's a stand you have to hang yourself. What are the first couple steps that you're taking right now in August?
I'm going fishing. I'm going to the store to get groceries. I go get a massage now and then. I'm doing absolutely nothing. My trees were all prepared or re-groomed at my old locations by May, by mid-May at the latest. So all my work is done.
So you're
I
not
do
you're not going there at all until bow season.
absolutely not. When you're hunting heavily pressured areas, any molestation of your locations is going to possibly cost you an opportunity and educate the mature bucks that I want to kill to become nocturnal before season even opens. So I don't make any intrusions. I do. I do make a preseason speed tour. That's very critical for my early season hunting. So let's say this year I probably have 50 trees that are ready to hunt. You know, I have two pieces of private property with permission, both under 40 acres in size, and then I hunt a lot of public land. So the public land locations, I don't really have to go in and re-groom or do that because you can't cut anything. But on my private locations, I re-groom them every spring. I look for new locations based on what I saw last year, reacting to movements from last year. And then of my 50 locations, probably 20 of them are early season locations, and some of those early season locations can also be hunted during the rut phases. So what I will do on all of my early season hunting locations is I will make a speed tour, and I usually don't go in, and keep in mind Michigan's bow season starts October 1. Most mature bucks have shed their velvet by September 5th at the latest, the mature bucks. So I don't go in until at least September 20th to check my early season locations, because when I'm prepping them or re-grooming them in the spring, I have no idea if the white or red oaks are going to be having and dropping acorns. I don't know if the apple trees are going to have apples. I don't know if the scrape areas that I've got prepared are going to be active because, due to crop rotations or masking fruit production. So after September 20th, when the bucks have had 2.5 weeks or more to leave physical sign, then I go in and do my preseason speed tour. So I'm going to be totally clad in scent lock, just as if I were hunting. I may take an extension saw, and I basically visit all of my early season locations to see what kind of buck sign is at them. Because most of my early season locations are food based. So if they're food based, because in the summer and early season, mature bucks and does, all the deer basically on a bedding to feeding routine pattern. So by doing the speed tour, if there's does feeding at a specific destination location, there should be buck sign there as well if there's trees and stuff adequate for bucks to leave scrapes and rubs. So that's what I do. I visit every one of my early season locations. I mentally note, the trees that are dropping food, acorns. When it's red or whites, I prefer the whites. An apple tree is probably over the oaks. But I mentally look at all the sign in the area. I judge the height of the rubs if there's rubs to see if it's by a mature buck, being taller up the tree. I look to see if there's active scrapes, because if there's a lot of does feeding there and there's a mature buck visiting it as well, he's probably going to have a scrape there at a destination doe location, feeding location. So I do that preseason speed tour sometime after September 20th, and that lays my foundation for my plan of attack for the first 4 or 5 days of bow season.
Now you're taking me back to when I used to hunt the Chequamegon National Forest in northern Wisconsin, because it's all coming back to me on how we used to approach it. Joe's listening to this. How we used to approach it. But will you hunt those areas without food, without natural mast?
I might hunt the edge of a standing cornfield, which is not mast or fruit, but it's still a food-based location.
But will you hunt any big woods locations without food early season?
No. Early season, everything gravitates around scrapes, which are typically going to be at destination doe feeding locations, or food. I
We
may hunt in a transition zone too, from a bedding area to a feeding
Yeah,
destination
that's what
feeding
I was.
location.
That's what I was getting at. That
Oh, okay.
those are the only places we really even had. I mean, the mast for us it was red oaks. That's the only food that there was up. You know that national forest is like 1.3 million acres,
Yeah.
and it was just a sea of nothingness. Now we
Yeah.
weren't hunting when we say mature bucks. We were hunting any buck because that's you were
Yeah.
lucky to see a buck. I think I stopped hunting there in 90. Joe will comment on this. I think it was 97. But anyways, those transition areas are what our early season, the only places we had. But we
Yeah.
tried to make it a spot that you could get to, obviously, that was not even close to the bedding area. And it was
Yeah.
normally where those hardwood ridges would dump down to either tamaracks or there were some spruce swamps and things like that. And you could find those trails. And if you've hunted it long enough, this was all public land. If you hunted it long enough, there was a chance that you could catch a buck there in September.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now you're in Michigan where there is farm ground around you, most places, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I can totally relate to what you're talking about because whenever you're hunting big timber, which I did for 20 years, I didn't hunt much ag at all. Um, Hunting is very difficult in big timber areas. And back when you're going back into the 80s and 90s, there weren't near the quantity of bucks that there are now,
Right.
and definitely not the quantity of mature bucks because
Yep.
there were so many damn gun hunters and they targeted any legal antlered buck. But in big timber areas, you don't have destination locations like you do in agricultural areas. And also in big timber areas, deer have bigger core areas. So they tend to wander, and there's oaks all over the place. So there's no rhyme or reason for you to get in this oak and expect them to come to this oak when there's 50 more on top of the ridge. So hunting transition routes to the ridge from a known bedding area connecting it obviously is going to be your best bet. And I understand why you didn't want to get tight to the bedding area because in the early season, there's a very high probability before there's been any hunting pressure of the bucks, mature bucks, bedding, or the bucks period, bedding close to the peripheral edge because there hasn't been any hunting pressure to push them back in deeper as there will be later in the season. So if you set up too close to the bedding area, you're on an evening hunt, you're going to be possibly spooking them with your entry. And on the morning hunts, it's difficult because if you're anywhere close to the feeding zone, you're spooking them with your entry as
Morning
well.
hunts were almost impossible. It was almost
Yeah.
literally impossible to hunt that ground. What
Yeah.
is speaking of that? So let's talk about because most of the people listening to this podcast, I would say, probably are hunting. If you're hunting big woods, bless your heart. I know that is very difficult. We've both done it.
Yeah.
But if you're hunting in an area that does have egg, you might not necessarily have it on the property you hunt. Um, Walk us through that, John, as far as I know you're looking at what's in season, so to speak, if it's apples, if it's acorns, if it's, alfalfa on the neighboring farmers' ground. How long are you keying on that? Or are you just, based off of the number of sets you have, are you just kind of playing it by ear?
I don't hunt any edges of agricultural fields other than standing corn in Michigan. So the only crop fields I hunt during the early season are standing corn, and I'll typically set up along standing corn where there's also some semblance of security cover bordering it. So a buck would feel comfortable transitioning either into the standing corn or out of the standing corn. He's got security cover on both sides. I quit hunting edges of like pick corn or alfalfa or bean, any short crop fields. I quit hunting those in the 70s because when you're hunting in a heavily pressured area, that's a waste of your time because mature bucks just don't go out into those during daylight like you see on TV. So, so I guess that's my answer. And ag is just easier to hunt because a lot of the crops are going to be in alfalfa and going to be in soybeans or maybe winter wheat field. And that's places where mature bucks are not going to be during daylight hours. So it condenses the mature bucks and the deer in general, for somebody that's just trying to kill anything, into a smaller zone. And anytime you condense the quantity of deer into a smaller zone, your probability of getting an opportunity is higher as long as you hunt correctly and don't spook deer with your entries and exits, and you have a decent scent control regimen.
That's the hardest thing. And you taught me this because I experienced great success with it. When you first started writing about staging areas in deer and deer hunting years ago, that really changed how I looked at, because I was guilty as anybody else of hunting those edges of those fields, especially around here where we live now. You'd see 50 deer a night in those fields, but number one, you weren't seeing too many bucks, and if you did, they were in the middle of the field, or they were entering in those, I always call them tertiary trails, that you never would guess where that. You'd see the nice big main trails coming out where all the does and fawns would come out, but those big bucks, he's popping out 80 yards down right at dusk, and you never were going to get a shot at him. So then I started moving back into the woods and had great success. However, getting into those spots, and especially out of those spots, was extremely difficult. So what are some of the tactics you use when you do that? I know getting in there is one thing, but getting out of there is a whole nother ballgame.
Well, your plan should always be to enter a location for a hunt where deer are not, and to exit a location where deer are not after dark. So, like if I'm going to hunt, let's say I set up, because I do a lot of exactly what you're saying, where I may be set up 50 yards off of a short crop field in a transition zone between a bedding area to that crop field, knowing my shot, if it's at a mature buck in Michigan, a heavily pressured state, is going to be probably within the last 5 to 10 minutes before dark. So they're transitioning when there's still a little bit of daylight, but they're not going to actually hit the crop field until it's dark. So I will, on an entry, let's say it's an evening entry, I never enter any place where I'm going to hunt the edge just off the side of a short crop field. I never enter along the perimeter edge. I always will walk out through the middle of the field, probably 100 yards from the edge where I need to go into. So I walk out through the middle of the field, because there's going to be no deer out in that field in the evening when I'm entering. And then when I get even with the location I need to go into the woods to my stand, or my saddle stand, I'll just cut directly over to that spot and then go directly to my tree. And then when I exit, I usually wait about 20 minutes after dark, because I don't want to spook a buck that may be transitioning to that crop field with my exit. So I'll wait till after dark to pretty much guarantee they're already past me and in the field. You know, even if they're not coming on the very runway I'm on, they're not going to be within hearing zone of me. And then I will exit through the timber out. Now, exactly the opposite on a morning. I'll enter through the timber to the location, or through a swamp to the location, and then I will exit out to the field, and then walk out into the field and leave through the middle of the field. Because if you enter on an evening hunt down the edge of a crop field, a short crop field, the likelihood of there being does or subordinate bucks or fawns bedded within proximity to that short crop field's edge are very high, and you will spook them with your entry walking along the edge of the field. So obviously, if you spook them, they're going to go the direction away from the field, which is the direction you're expecting your target buck to come from, and they're going to spook him. Maybe he'll spook, or maybe if he gets up later, he's not going to move that direction before dark.
100%. That 100%, and I think I learned it from you and Steve Bartilla. Exactly how I approached it. And I've written about this one property I used to hunt many, many times. But it was a, excuse my language, pain in the ass getting out of there. But what I learned was, when I did that, I called it deep woods exit. Those deer were already in the field. This was mostly an alfalfa field over the years, but it was a small property, 35 acres. Ian, you hunted it. And when I exited, it was state land, but you couldn't hunt the state land. But once you got there was a trail in that state land, I'd have to bring my bow case with me, and I'd stash that in the woods, and because it was a soft bow case, because you could walk through the state land, but you couldn't have a uncased weapon. But that was about that was a 1.5 mile walk out of there. And I remember taking friends in there, and it's like, well, no, I'm like, no, if you walk through that field, I don't care if that deer's 300 yards out there, and I don't even care what kind of deer it is, that law of diminishing returns. The second time, you're not going to see as many deer. The third time, and by the fourth, fifth time, you're not seeing anything. And then the bucks, I would actually add, when you said walking along, and I know you take your scent control to the nth degree, but for me, walking along that edge, invariably, even if I didn't bust deer on the way in, when they came out, one of them would smell something. And they might not blow, but they get a little nervous, and you'd see them from a distance. And the same thing, I always said that law of diminishing returns, especially this special time. For us, I think it's the 17th of September this year. And then I do hunt Wyoming, and those are unpressured deer. But even in those situations, you got first, second sit normally. You got to make sure everything is just right in doing it.
Especially if you don't have a scent control where you can disregard wind direction and not be concerned about leaving a scent ribbon on your entry route. That's the biggest game changer in bow hunting. When you cannot have to worry about a deer's nose, you've got more advantages than anybody else, hands down. It's not even close. And that's something I never do. I never ever worry about.
I know you don't. It's continuous to me. We have your videos where you're in your minivan and all your Rubbermaid boxes full of clothes. I know how you do it, and I know you have never been paid a dime by ScentLock. You believe in the activated carbon. I do too. What is your boot situation again? How do you prepare your? What do you use on your?
I do nothing to my boots. My boots, I probably have 8 boots at any one time, 8 pairs of boots in the back of my minivan, and they're in my Otter sled, which that's what I use to slide up into the van with a deer in it if I kill one. So they're just loosely in there, and I have never ever had an issue with that. They're always rubber or neoprene.
Yeah.
And I don't use boots for at least 2 years when I buy a pair of boots. I let them air out, or I'll put them in dirt in a wheelbarrow in my garage, because I want to get rid of that rubber. Or
I didn't know this. I didn't know this part about you.
Yeah, I've got new boots up in the top of my garage right now, airing out. So, and another thing, when you're hunting, big timber is usually in hill country, because big timber is usually in country where it's people are less apt to build homes, less apt to grow crops, because the landscape just isn't profitable to do that kind of stuff. So the advantage of big timber is you can go for miles usually and not worry about crossing the property line. The negative to ag is there's a lot more deer in ag areas, per square mile.
Yep.
But the negative is, if you got a 35 acre or a 10 acre parcel of property, then you have to worry about your entries and exits even more, because you can't cross property lines.
Yep.
So there's negatives and perks to both timber and ag, because timber is such big land. It may, like you said, it may be 1.5 miles for an entry, but you can do 1.5 miles on an entry because you're not worried about crossing somebody's property line.
Right.
Whereas ag, everything is small parcels for most normal bow hunters, and property lines causes a main issue with entries and exits, and not spooking deer. And the scent control thing, backing up to that a little bit, where you said after 2 or 3 visits your deer sightings go down. When you have a scent control regimen that works, when you're walking to your location, you're climbing your tree, you're not leaving any odor. Okay, so your odds of having deer numbers go down per hunt are much, much less. Anytime you're hunting without a scent control regimen, every time you climb the tree, you walk to your tree, you leave the spot, even if the deer comes 2 hours later, they smell that human activity at that location, and they are going to try and avoid that during daylight hours. So if you're hunting, let's say, a rut phase location, a location that should be hunted only during the rut phases, and you hunt it during the early season, and especially if you hunt it during the lull, when most mature bucks are going to be nocturnal outside the security of their bedding areas, you're leaving odor and you're altering the doe traffic. You know, the mature bucks are probably not coming there anyway till after dark, after the first day or two of season, and maybe before that because of all of the other hunters' preseason intrusions. So you're altering the doe traffic. And when you're altering the doe traffic away from your location, a rut phase location, by the time the rut comes around, if that doe traffic's not coming in there in the daylight to feed, neither are the bucks that are pursuing them.
So
So
what is
having a
your
scent control is a big, big difference on all of that stuff.
what is your window for an early season buck? Like, when do you say, okay, well, because I never really. I'm gonna let you. I'm gonna let you answer that question first. What is your window? Do you have the first? Okay, you guys start October 1st. Do you have the first 2 weeks, and then you got to?
Oh, no, no. As far as early season hunting locations, I'd say if I don't kill a mature buck within the first 4 days, my early season hunting locations are toast.
Really?
Now, a lot of them are trees that will be dropping mast or fruit into the rut phases. So once the first 3 or 4 days are over and I hunt maybe once or twice at a specific location that I know is going to be dropping food and have doe activity into the rut phases, that spot is totally left alone. 100% I don't even go near it to hunt another location. That spot is left alone. Obviously on public lands, you can't control what other hunters do, but usually I'm back in places that you have to access with hip boots or waders or a boat or a canoe. So I'm usually back places where most other hunters are not going.
That's
So I'm
after
not.
the first 4 days. That's after the first 4 days.
No, no, I'm always. I
Okay.
never hunt public land that's walk where I can walk to my hunting location, standing upright during any time of bow season. I mean, you got to figure if there's 40 bow hunters per square mile on public land, 30 to 40 bow hunters per square mile, probably 90% of them are doing most of their scouting and location preparation prior to season. So their influx of human activity has already caused most mature bucks that I want to kill to become nocturnal outside the security cover of their bedding areas. So it's rare when I kill a mature buck in Michigan during the first 4 days of season. Very rare. I think I've got 5 out of 35 Michigan work
Wow.
bucks I shot during the first 4 or 5 days of season. All the rest are during the rut phases.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Traditions. As you probably know, 2 years ago they came out with the Nitro Fire in collaboration with Federal Premium and Hodgdon. The Fire Stick, they shoot through those guns. This has really changed muzzleloading and has made it more safer, more accurate. Check them out today at traditionsfirearms.com. So what are you going to tell the guy who is, we're going to bring it back to those guys, hunting the small properties, let's just say less than 40 acres. What is my best bet going out there to start bow season, outside of having 50 other options?
Yeah.
What can I do? Because I
Yeah,
think that's a trap we all get stuck in. I have a couple spots and I want to hunt.
Yep.
What do I do?
Yep. What you do, you have to hunt smart. If you're pursuing mature bucks only, you have to hunt smart. Obviously, if you're hunting a year and a half old 6 points and 4 points, you can get away with stuff. But when you're hunting for mature bucks only, and you're very limited in your size of property, and it also is based on the design of the property. Does it border a bedding area of somebody else's? Does your property have mast and fruit trees on it? There's a lot of parameters that go with this. But on a small piece of property, I'm going to hunt it a couple of times, 3 or 4 times during the first few days of season. And then if that property is also suited well for rut phase hunting, I've got places that are going to be decent for rut phase hunting. I will totally abandon that property and not even go on it whatsoever until at least October 25th, if not Halloween on October 28th. it's that big of a deal to leave it pristine and let the doe traffic stew, because that's what's going to attract the bucks when their testosterone rises and they start moving during daylight hours, during the pre-rut and rut. So you leave it alone, and if you want to hunt, if you got a buddy that invites you to hunt, go screw up his property.
It's
Or
true.
or if you're a public land guy, which I am, if you've scouted, let's say you've scouted 10 public lands within a 50-mile area of your house. Okay, Michigan has a lot of public lands, and they're typically parcels from anywhere from 200 acres to 600 acres. Some of them are bigger, but most of them are in that size range. So I scout a lot of properties, and let's say I scout a property during postseason or two public lands, and I find some bedding areas. I'm a huge interior bedding area guy. And let's say I find a public land that's got some bedding areas that are not as well suited as some other public lands that I've had in the past. And I'm not gonna, so I'm not gonna hunt those public land bedding areas during the rut phases. I may go into those on an early morning hunt where I'm in my tree at least an hour and a half before daybreak and settled in, and do a rattle sequence. Not rattle, but sparring sequences. Do a couple sparring sequences at like 7:45 and 7:50, because there's a chance there's a mature buck there that I would want to kill. And when they're sparring during the lull, as soon as bucks shed their velvet, they start sparring for pecking order, social pecking order within the herd, local herd. So they do that during the lull as well. They do it during the early season. They do it during the lull, all the way leading up to the pre-rut, when does start actually coming into estrus, and then they start fighting for breeding rights. So all of that social pecking order sparring sequences, it attracts bucks. So if I'm in a bedding area where a buck may feel comfortable getting up and moving during daylight hours early in the morning after he's been calm all night long, he may, if you do a soft sparring sequence and he hears it, he may come over just to socially check out what it is, and you get an opportunity. Or let's say you're on public land and there's a standing cornfield bordering it. That's a phenomenal spot, because most public lands have cover, because obviously if they didn't have a lot of cover, somebody would have sold it and it would have been private land with ag in it. So when you have public land with a standing cornfield butting up to it, that's a great place to sit on the perimeter of the standing corn and try to spar a buck out of the standing corn. Because when they're standing corn, most of the time, mature bucks in a pressured area, they're going to be bedding in the standing corn. Once it gets tall enough, they're going to, because that's as pristine a bedding area as you can get, plus they can eat in it. So doing sparring sequences early in the morning or late in the afternoon, maybe 45 minutes before dark, the likelihood of sparring, not rattling like you hear on TV, sparring sequences, and I have some of those on my YouTube channel. It's a really good way to bring bucks out of that standing corn to the perimeter edge where you might have a shot. And let's see, in 2022, I sparred in 16 bucks between October 1st and October 15th. And last year, I only sparred in 6. But they were all in those either public land area locations where I'm not going to hunt during the rut, or along standing corn. And you can also, if let's say you have access to 60 acres and 40 acres of it is crops, and it's in standing corn, you can hunt the perimeters of the standing corn on your property without it affecting your rut phase locations that you're going to hunt after the corn has been picked. Because you're entering through the corn, you're cutting over to the tree, you're doing your sequences, and then you're exiting back through the corn when you're done. So you are in no manner intruding on the rut phase locations back in the timber that you're going to be hunting once the corn has been picked.
Are you taking notes here? Because I'm pointing to Ian again. This guy's the one who taught me. Now I'm like the, I don't even know, call me the John Eberhart light, but those tips you've taught all of us. I did the 90 minutes before first light thing because you told me to. That was probably 25 years ago, and that really increased my deer sightings. I have to cut that off though. But we're going to mention John's website, and he's got a new book series coming out. We're going to talk about that here in a minute. But I told you I wasn't going to rile you. I have to rile you a little bit. Okay. So every time we do a podcast with John, or John writes an article for us, we'll get the peanut gallery chime in. Okay. So I'm going to throw some questions at you, and I'm going to get your this is unscripted reactions.
Our podcasts are always unscripted.
This is
I don't-
this is
I
100%.
don't
100% unscripted. Okay, so we just revisited the Rompela Buck not that long ago, and this is the overriding comment. I know you've read it. The only reason John is so skeptical is he's jealous. He's jealous he's never killed a world record buck, and he's jealous that somebody in Michigan has killed more bigger bucks than him.
Well, Mitch has not killed more bigger bucks than me, and I have no interest in. First of all, I know in Michigan I'm not going to kill a world record buck, so that's the first thing to put out there. Am I jealous? Absolutely not. When he first showed that buck to people, I didn't think anything about it really, other than the fact that he had showed me that shed that was all weather checked, which was a world record shed probably 7 or 8 years prior. And, that was definitely fictitious, because he told me it was a 2-day-old shed, which was an absolute lie. There's no way that was. So I am not jealous. I'm not jealous of anybody. I just don't like people getting fed a bunch of crap that I know is not real, and that I know that the scoring director from Traverse City for Commemorative Bucks of Michigan, he knows it's not real as well. And I have a lot of reasons, and I've told them to you on the podcast, why that is a fictitious story. I mean, nothing about it makes sense to me.
It doesn't.
And also the bucks that he shot after that, 25-plus inch inside spreads. Come on.
4 or 5.
Real. That's impossible.
We just had one come across, it was yesterday. I'm like, this thing is insanely wide. And it was 24 and some change.
Yeah.
And it was just a guy, he killed it in Missouri. And I said, what would I tell you if I knew a guy, or said, I knew a guy who, or I didn't know him, but like a guy claimed he killed 5 of those over 6 years, and they were all 25. And he was like, no way. I mean, okay.
And that's in Missouri.
Yeah. Okay, so I got the blood.
Well, I've been a scorer. Let me interrupt for a second. I've been a scorer for 30-some years. Okay, from 1985 until about 3 years ago when I resigned. I quit doing it. And you know how many 20-inch inside spread bucks I scored in Michigan?
A handful?
In 35 years?
A handful?
0.
0.
I don't think I ever scored a buck over 20-inch inside spread. 20-inch outside spread, yes. Inside spread, no. That 20-inch inside spread is a very rare buck.
20. Not 25, 20. Yeah.
20. Yeah, 25 is like a mule deer spread, And to kill 5 of those in a 6 or 7 year period, your odds of winning the mega lottery are extremely higher than ever possibly doing that.
With that. Okay, we'll let that one rest for at least you got your blood pumping here pretty good.
I am not jealous whatsoever. I just don't like people bloviating fictitious stuff to other hunters and expecting them to believe it.
See, I wanted you to say it because I've been trying to say this it's going on decades now, because I know you. I know your personality. I know the integrity that you stand on. And some people look at it and it's like, well, John's just an arrogant prick. That's John. John is just full of himself. John just wants to pound his chest and say that he's killed 50. I forgot that it was 50. Or I should say I didn't even know it was 50. 50 record class. And when we say record class, it's like 140 or better bucks.
25.
What's that?
125 out of state. That's
125. Okay, so that'd be like Pope and Young. Like, what do you have to gain by telling people that you've killed all these deer?
My goal in the deer hunting world and why I write stuff, why I do podcasts, is to teach people that hunt regular property, not managed property, how to be more successful. I know how hard people work at deer hunting, and when they become more successful, it kind of almost changes their life and how they interact with their family during deer season, how they interact with other hunters in the area, and I just want people to be more successful for the time that they put into it. I could care less how many record book bucks some TV guy's got that's got maybe 200 of them, okay? They shot them all in managed areas where there's no competition. You can't measure anybody's skill set if they're not doing it against competition. That'd be like trying to judge how good of a football player somebody is, that never played against any competition. You can't, or any athlete for that matter. If they all compete against competition to become icons. TV guys don't. They compete against nobody. So I am not jealous. I'm very confident in my skill sets. I am very confident in liking to share them with other people. And if somebody takes my confidence as being arrogant, that's good for them. A lot of people think I'm arrogant because they can't, I don't know how to put this. They don't want to do the work to make themselves better hunters, or there's a lot of guys that hunt in lightly hunted states or lightly hunted areas that don't have to have a pristine scent control regimen. They don't have to convert to hunting out of the saddle because they're going to get their opportunities no matter how they do it, because there's a lot of mature bucks in the areas they hunt.
That's true.
So my goal is to teach hunters that hunt in tough conditions how to kill mature bucks. That's my goal, and if somebody thinks I'm arrogant and cocky, maybe I am, so be it.
You're not, and I wanted you to answer that too, because if you look at John's, and I'm talking in front of him, so I know this makes him embarrassed, but he's not hawking products. He's not saying I needed this, that, or the other thing to kill this deer. He's just saying common sense and a lot of freaking hard work to do it. Okay, so with that being said, you're still old school in that you're still writing. And I know that you've written this colossal trilogy, isn't it? Three books are coming out again from you?
Yeah, I wrote a book, and when I sent it to the book designer, because I'm self-publishing this one,
Yep.
The other 3 books were published through a publishing company. It was going to be 900 pages. So he laughed and he said, "There's no way you're going to sell a 900-page book. It's going to be that thick."
It would be
So so we broke it into 3 equal-sized books. They're going to be about 230 pages each. There's 27 chapters combined in the 3 volumes of books. It's called Ultimate Guide to DIY Bucks is the name of the books, volume 1, 2, and 3. And pretty much it has everything to do with anything about bow hunting pressured bucks.
How long did it take you to write this?
17 months and over 5,000 hours.
Good gracious. That's crazy, man. As a guy who's spent his whole career doing this, I know how much work is involved with that.
Yeah, pretty much every day I got up from January 2023. I'd get up at 7 o'clock, sometimes at 5 o'clock, go up in my office and write until, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and take breaks for lunch and dinner. And I didn't even put my boat in the water. I fish a lot.
And I know you're a big fisherman. Okay, so
I didn't even put my boat in because I didn't want it to take away from my time spent writing.
When is the first one coming out, and where can people find it?
All 3 of the books will be available at the same time, and they should be available in early September 1 through 10, somewhere in there. And they would be able to order them on my website, which is deer-john.net, deerjohn.net, or they could order them through Tethered's website.
Tethered is the saddle company.
Tethered is the saddle company. There is a saddle hunting chapter, and Tethered will be the fulfillment center because they have the whereabouts and the warehouse space to do the fulfillment.
Okay, I'm sorry, I already forgot the name. The name of the book?
Ultimate Guide
to DIY Bucks.
DIY Bucks, volumes 1, 2, and 3.
By John Eberhart. You can also find his other books that he's written on that website. Check them out. I know we personally worked on some of them when we were at Krause Publications back in the day with Deer and Deer Hunting. And if you've read any of John's stuff, or if you haven't, let me just put it this way. If you haven't read any of John's stuff, you're going to learn the things that I've learned over 30 years. I always said, I did that Whitetail Wisdom book, and I said, this isn't my wisdom. Because on my first day on this job, Charlie Alsheimer told me, he said, be a sponge. He said, not just for becoming a better editor and a content creator and things like that. He said, if you want to be a really good hunter, he said, you're going to be dealing with the best guys in the country, and John is one of them. So I'm telling you what, just read his stuff. Check out that book, and I think you will become a better deer hunter, and it probably will start pretty quickly. John, thank you so much for joining us again. It's always a pleasure, my friend.
All right.
I hope you do get some fishing in, though, because I know how much you like to do that.
I think I'm going to go today.
All right, that's awesome.
It's all done, and it's at the publisher.
Awesome. That's great. All right, for John Eberhart, I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us. All we ask you to do is like and subscribe to this podcast, whether you're listening to it on Spotify or you're watching it on YouTube, Facebook, or other places. Until next week, Thursday, we'll catch you again for another episode of Deer Talk Now. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, my pleasure. Always love doing podcasts with a few people. You and Mark Kenyon do really
well. Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you so much. We very much appreciate having you on. Okay. And we'll put links up there for you, too, in the comment section.